Not on her. Not on her. Me. Me. I'm important. Okay. She's just a dummy. A little confusion there with the focus. But we worked it out. Today, we're going to talk about the Panasonic 85mm f1.8. I am shooting right this second on the Panasonic 85mm at f1.8 to give you a basic idea of shooting my lovely face. Hopefully it makes me as about as beautiful as I can become. But that gives you an idea. What I'm going to do now is switch over to my 20 to 60 so I can actually show you the lens and talk about it. So be right back. I have changed back to my 20 to 60 so that we can talk about the 85mm f1.8, which this is the lens here. This is the lens by itself. It also has a hood, which obviously makes it a little bit longer. It's a locking hood. So you put it on and it locks tight. Press a button on the side. Don't know if you can see that. To remove it. So it's a really nice sized lens. I prefer it to others. I know some of you might be thinking, but hey, Sigma's got a 85mm 1.4, better bokeh. Yeah, maybe. And from everything I hear, it is an outstanding lens. But it is bigger, it is heavier, and I believe it is even more expensive. I didn't actually look it up because part of the reason I buy the Panasonic lenses, not because I'm not a firm believer that Sigma makes excellent glass, is that although it's the L-mount alliance, not everything translates. It's the mount. The mount itself are all cross-compatible, and the basic electronics and autofocus, all that. But it's not everything that makes up a lens. The way the aperture changes, whether it does it in steps or whether it does it smoothly, is dependent upon just what they put inside. And Panasonic's is very smooth because they take the extra effort. They spend the money on the lens to do that. Also, it has superb linear focusing. So if you want a manual focus, you can go in and you can actually change the focus throw of the lens to however many degrees you prefer, or you can have that traditional, the faster you turn it, the quicker it moves, digital focus. But a lot of people who do video, and personally I like it better when I'm doing regular photography, like to have that very predictable amount of movement. On top of that, it's not only predictable, but as far as muscle memory and stuff, it's easier to hit the mark, because if I was to make a mark on here, focus, put it out of focus, bring it back to exactly that mark, the thing I targeted will be in focus again. It's that good. They put in whatever is required in sensors or encoders to know where this lens is in its turning radius, whatever. So that to me is really important, and that's built into the Panasonic lenses, and it is not necessarily built in any other lenses in the L-mount alliance. So if that's important to you, if linear focus is important to you, I'd say stick with Panasonic. It's not metal construction on the outside. I believe it's a plastic on the outside. I personally have absolutely zero issues with plastic. It saves weight. These type of plastics they have been using for the last whatever 30 years or so just have become so good. They're just as good as metal. I don't understand people who just get so caught up in, oh, it's metal, it's better. It's not. Plain simple, or we wouldn't have carbon fiber now, would we? Uh, there are advantages, and there is nothing to fear in these kind of great space age plastics that they use on lenses. Again, focus is super smooth. It doesn't have an aperture. I know that is important to a lot of people. I have Fuji lenses. It's nice, but it's certainly not a deal killer for me. If it is for you, well, okay, well, then not for you. So that's down to personal preference. Now, I will also be comparing it to another lens just for grins, whatever, and this is the Fuji 50 millimeter f2. Now, again, this is like an equivalent of a 75 versus this is an 85. Some people, Fuji people out there who may be watching this, might sit there and say, that's not the right lens. You should be looking at the 56 millimeter f1.2. And I would say, you're right, but let's look at it another way. This lens, I have this written down. This lens is about 450. This lens is about 600. I just evened it out. Didn't deal with the 99.95 cents. Now, 600, 450. So this is $150 less. If I was to go to the Fuji 56 millimeter f1.2, we would be jumping to, let me grab my piece of paper here and put it at a distance so I can read it. We would be jumping to $1,000 or $999. So that's $400 more. I would no longer say they're in the same ballpark. And some people might be sitting there going, oh, but Fuji's got that 50 f1. And they'd be 100% right. And if you got a spare $1,499 and want to carry around a lens that's almost 2 pounds, go for it. Buy the Fuji, buy that lens. Personally, I have Fuji. I own Fuji. I like Fuji, but I bought Fuji for a lightweight carry, so I have absolutely no interest in buying a lens that's almost 2 pounds when I can achieve the same goal with a slightly heavy camera body, excuse me, and a lens that is less than a pound. So keep that all and reference each other. Let me go through the numbers here. This is 12.5 ounces. I got this from B&H's site, so if it's wrong, it's their fault. Sorry about that. The Fuji F2 is 7.05 ounces. Now that's impressive. That's almost half what this is. So there's reasons to do whatever one wants to do. The 56 millimeter f1.2 is 14.29 ounces, only slightly more weight than this one, way more money than this one, to achieve essentially the same goal. And I tell you, the mechanics of this lens kick the 56 millimeters ass. Sorry, Fuji. And then the Fuji venerable new 50 millimeter f1 at 1.38, I can talk, 1.86 pounds, so almost 2 pounds at $14.99, which is just ridiculous. But we'll actually look at these two, because considering this is only 150 less, or this one is 150 more, they're both essentially in the f1.8 to f2 range, and they're similar focal lengths. Not exact matches, but similar. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Panasonic, because part of the reason I like Panasonic so much was the fact that they did come out with these lenses, because it was an absolute fantastic idea to come out with f1.8 lenses. All these manufacturers have been chasing these monstrous f1.2s and f1s and whatever, and they're great halo lenses, and maybe to some people they can justify their existence, or they just have lots of money so they buy it. Personally, I don't want to carry them, because that's one of the penalty. You got to buy it, and then you also got to put it in your case, and you got to carry it. And when it comes to a 85 millimeter lens, f1.8 is going to give me all the bokeh I need. If I choose to chase apertures in the 1.2, 1.0 range, it would be for smaller focal length lenses, for a 35 millimeter or a 24 millimeter, because those are the lenses that are going to make it harder for you to blur backgrounds. Again, this is usually a studio type lens, usually outside, not the kind of things you would normally use indoors. So you got a lot of control over where you put your subject and where you put your background, and that means you can affect the bokeh drastically. When you're using a 35 or a 24, you don't have that luxury. You're usually using it indoors because it's tighter circumstances, and then you might not be able to get your subject away from a wall or a background that's offensive that you want to blur out. And that's when those low apertures, to me, are more important. So I really adore the fact that they're coming out with these nice size f1.8, because I really think for 99% of people, and those who really understand that bokeh is a combination of focal length and aperture and distances from subject and backgrounds, is plenty enough. Now, the other thing is, it's one of the things that motivated me to buy Panasonic, but also Nikon is coming out or came out with a bunch of 1.8 lenses. But theirs is actually around the same weight, slightly heavier. Excuse me. And it's $800, so it's $200 more. So it's just a really great value alternative, and it's got the features. It's got an AF manual switch. It doesn't have an aperture ring. Some people that's really important too. Doesn't matter to me. I got a little wheel on the front of my camera, and that lets me change the aperture just fine. So that's pretty much it. As far as the size, the weight, everything, I just think it is a great little option, especially going along with the Panasonic S5, which is nice sized body and is not extremely heavier than my XT3 or an XT4. So to me, if I want a portrait lens, this is the one for me. Very happy Panasonic came out with it. But let's talk about the lens in depth. And the first thing we're going to look at is bokeh. So let's do a quick view of bokeh. This lens wide open at f1.8, you'll notice that we do see some cat's eye on the edges. That's on the very extent of the lens. Got to remember, it's an image circle, so when we're looking at the width, we're pushing to the edges of this lens's coverage area. But if you notice, when you go to the middle, because the height doesn't push that image circle to the limits, pretty much stays round. So it's only as you progress to the edge of the lens that you start to see that cat's eye, and you can see where it's a nature of the optical quality of the lens, because you can see, if you look at those cat's eyes, you can see they're always kind of facing the center of the lens. Now, you don't have to entirely live with that. Again, this is understanding the qualities of things. If I stop this down to about 2.8, you can see I pretty much have rounded that bokeh out. Now, it's gotten a little bit smaller. Hopefully that showed that it's pretty good at bokeh at 1.8. You can do a lot with it. The distance to the background was only about 3 feet, and showed you that if you stop down, you can round out the cat's eyes a little bit. but for the most part, it works. Good candidate for that. Now, next thing is, let's take a look at breathing, so that I can sit here and manipulate. So I'm going between about 5 feet and 10 feet. And you can see there's a decent amount of breathing there. That's a shame. Okay, so there was breathing. Definitely, potentially a problem. I see it as a lens I might want to use, but wasn't particularly pleased with the breathing aspects. And they kind of advertised that they were going to try to keep it under control, and I'm not necessarily sold that they did that great a job of doing that. But whatever, it is what it is. So that was breathing. Next, we're going to go in and look into IQ, and I'm going to go on the computer, which is a new thing for me. So hopefully this works out. And we're going to look at the IQ and bokeh, and just the general quality aspects, and look at a few different images and go from there. Okay, I'm trying something new here. I am recording with my Radeon card using the Radeon software, and I have a little image of myself there in the corner. Not that you want to look at my face anyways, but... And what we're going to compare here is, at first, I just want to show the JPEGs, because it's kind of interesting that the Fuji chose to be very warm on white balance, and Panasonic decided to be very cool. The reality actually sits somewhere between the two. But I wanted to show you what the two cameras decided on their own. So now I'm going to go to the RAWs. And again, I have the Fuji on the left and the Panasonic on the right. At this point, all that has been done to them is they have been given the same white balance. Basically took a white balance off the eye, and as you can see, they're pretty close now. They're both a little dark. So I think in both of these cases, I'm going to go and type it in. We'll give them like a half a stop boost, not pushing either one of those to any great extent. And maybe pull up the shadows to 20. Do the same thing over here. In reality, I find these to be both pleasant images and both needing about the same attention as we sit here and look at them at 100%. Now, when I go in here and zoom in, we'll go to 100% and look at them, and they're both attractive images. I find that the Panasonic appears to be a little sharper, but that is not unexpected. And it's usually requiring just about 10. Maybe not, don't need so much. Go in and I'll give it just a 8 structure on the Fuji, and I would say that they're now pretty close. Subtle differences in where the focus actually landed. Obviously, the Panasonic has a little bit thinner depth of field. That's just the nature of it, being that they are APS-C versus a full frame. So you can see this one is staying in focus longer as this curves along the side of her head. But both of them are good. I do notice that the Panasonic seemed to just stay a little bit nicer. I mean, this is where this is a 400% increase, but you can see everything's a little bit smoother. That's I think that's more camera than lens. I do like the Panasonic roll off, seems to be a little bit better. Up close, their colors are a little bit different, but they're, I mean, pretty close. Unless you're expert, you would not notice. I do like the shadows in here better than what's going on in here, but that's all nitpicking. This moire that we're seeing on both of them to different extents is more to do with this fabric than the cameras. Obviously, Panasonic uses software to try to reduce moire, and Fuji relies a lot on their X-Trans sensor. So I wouldn't, because of focus differences and depth of field differences, I wouldn't go on about either one of those too much. Now, when we look at these, let me go ahead and go in a little bit closer, and we look at the bokeh quality. The Panasonic is making a good showing. These are very smooth inside. They are showing some soap bubble, obviously cat's eye. If you stop down, you can make that go away a little bit. It's mostly seen on the edges of frames. Obviously, the Fuji is showing a lot more onion ring type bokeh, so that's not as attractive. But then again, at 100%, it doesn't stand out that much. I did notice something kind of odd on the Fuji over here. The Fuji had some weird effects going on here, here, and here. And on the Panasonic side, not so much. I would have to say that is probably something to do with X-Trans. So that's a little bit on the unattractive side. Otherwise, both of these images are nice, and I would not be entirely unhappy or find either one unworkable. As far as bokeh, this I can live with either one. Obviously, though, when it comes to lights, which show bokeh so much more than other things, it kind of sticks out a little bit more. But let me go ahead and make the Panasonic stand on its own so you can get a better view, because this is really more talking about the Panasonic 85mm 1.8, and I would say I am totally content with it. I think it is quite a lovely image, nice bokeh, and I think anyone who purchases it would be happy with it. There was a little bit of loca, I believe the term is called, around these. When you zoom in, there was a little bit more on the Fuji, but not so much. It is nice to see how smooth this is, because this is at 400%. I could get away with blowing this image up beyond normal reproduction ratios, and I think with the right resing up of the file, one can get quite large. I did a lot of that because I used to have a large format printing business, and when you have the tool around, you sit there and you make big images, and that was back when I had a Canon 1DS, so those are only like 12 megapixel images, so I would constantly be blowing those up, and we actually had one where I blew it up to a 8-foot by 10-foot display wall picture of a house, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It really came out well. So when you know what you're doing with resing up, it's amazing what you can get. So we'll look at some other images, but that's it for this one. Of heady, let's look at some other general stuff. None of this is particularly exciting. Here we have a pumpkin flower trying to resurrect itself from Halloween. That won't go well down here in Florida. But on this particular day, it was still looking beautiful. You can see the foreground blur, I think, is fairly attractive. Nothing terrible in there. And if we get in close, you can see the detail in here is beautiful. The zone of focus is right around here at the stamen. I think that's the proper technical term. And then it kind of goes out from there. And then we can also see a good idea of the background blur here as well. So not much of an image. Let's take a look at another flower. Catch up. You can see the sharpness is gorgeous. Let's go in here 300%. I mean, it's still looking good. So I got, for my use, I have no problem with this lens. This lens is gorgeous. Go ahead and take this out. Some general garbage sitting in the garden. Getting old and worn out. These little glass beads. Focus going off slowly in the background. The branches in sharp focus. Got this background greenery looking quite lovely. I love the detail and this rust on this old lantern. It just looks really nice, and these are pretty much untouched. Yeah, this is raw, brought into Capture One, and otherwise nothing has been done to it. Here's bokeh quality. This is at f6.3. And it's at ISO 800 at 2,000th of a second. Just for reference, this one is ISO 800. This guy was also ISO 800. This is f7.1. This guy was at f2.8. And let's go ahead and look at one of my cats here. Everybody has to have cat pictures. But there's things to look at here. One of the things that really impressed me with Panasonic is I got two cats. Got this guy, Bubba, and Boo here. And they're always hanging around each other. And I have a picture of them at ISO 6400, and I was just absolutely captivated at the quality that came out. How I can see the definition in their fur. Because when you're sitting there at high ISO and black cats, does not usually come out well. And I'll have to show that picture one day, because that was one of the things that really just made me so happy with my purchase. It's a nothing picture. It was just a snap I took of my silly cats, but it just amazed me how beautiful it was. You see the detail in his eyes. This is at 100%. Take it in 200%. You can see all his fur. Nose is slightly out of focus. The eyes seem to be pretty good. Focus is probably right in around here. Maybe not dead on with the eyes. And again, quality of the background blur. Again, this is f2.2, ISO 100, 1/250th of a second. And a nothing picture, but the right lens and things can make things look quite beautiful. And along that same line, here's Bubba. Probably Boo's tail there. Take a look at him at 200%. Again, the sharpness in the eyes. And these are just snaps. I didn't sit there and plan these. It's a beautiful day. Let them sit on the porch and took a few pictures. Grains of dirt On his face, again, nose just slightly out of focus, so we're really dead on the eyes here. And then that background blur, this one's shot at f4. And just looking good. And then here's kind of a little foreground, background, trailing off on him, but on his face here, I mean, just gorgeous. So I'm really happy with this lens. If you want a lot of other different kind of tests and how many lines per millimeter or whatever, I'm sure you can find sites that'll show you that. To me, it's like I take it out, I use it. If the pictures come back and I'm in love with them, that they have that pop and stuff that I look for, then I'm happy, and I'm happy with this lens, and I think anybody who buys it will be happy. So that's that. Yeah, so there you have it. We went over breathing, IQ, bokeh quality. If you're looking for more serious tests, whatever, I'm sure there's quite a few out there for you to take a look at. I personally evaluate by images, and like I said, I am very content with what I see. I got bright, snappy pictures. So it does it for me. I think well worth the money, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else Panasonic releases in this f1.8 line, because I think it can be very good for them and for us to have these more moderate alternatives, as long as they're quality optics. And this, my friends, I think is quality optic. So, like I said, I do these videos as I look and test a lens myself. So I figure I will share them with you. It'd be a great help if you were to give me a thumbs up, as long as you liked it, and to subscribe if you like this kind of content, so that I can grow this channel. So I'll see you next time. Bye.